Sea Breeze, a sleek white yacht designed purely for sophisticated luxury, was moored in the shallow waters of the sea, just some distance away from the dock, shining gloriously in the January sun. Karen stood at the other end, still at quite some distance from the dock as she stared at the yacht, wondering if this could be it. The marina spreading all around her was eerily quiet, the only sound being the gentle lapping of waves against the docks. Although Karen was fairly sure no zombies were nearby, she still moved cautiously, her boots crunching on broken glass and debris, which seemed to be resting on every street around the city. Everything was gradually crumbling as the zombie infestation spread, and Karen knew she needed to do something. It was true the world had ended months ago, but the destruction was still ongoing rampantly. The zombie numbers were growing, transforming every survivor they caught into one of their own. Karen did not wish for such a terrible fate and needed escape from all of it. As she stood by the water, a strange sense of peace engulfed her, a feeling which had been absent from her life since the past few months. Being on the run had certainly not been easy, and she had been surrounded by nothing but the noise of shouting and people falling dead all around her. She was always ready to hear yet another grunt or growl from those awful creatures. But here by the waves, all of it was gone. For a second, it felt as if the zombies had completely disappeared. But Karen knew better. She kept staring at the yacht, knowing fully well that zombies could not swim. They also had no way of reaching her if she could somehow just get to the yacht. Sea Breeze looked like a relic of the old world, its polished hull gleaming beautifully in the sunlight. Karen's heart raced with excitement as she considered the possibilities. The yacht was perfect. It was a floating fortress which would allow her to see the undead coming towards her from miles away. And even if they did reach the marina, they would never be able to swim towards her. She knew she had to do it. She had to make the best out of what was being presented to her. Taking a deep breath, she quickened her pace towards the yacht, all of her exhaustion momentarily forgotten. As she neared the end of the dock, she analyzed the distance between the dock and the yacht, which was about 250 meters. The sleek white floating vehicle anchored stationary in the shallow waters. She had never enjoyed swimming, but she was relieved by the distance between the dock and the yacht, because that ensured greater safety for her and the assurance that the zombies will not be able to reach her. Only if she herself could reach the yacht first. Karen quickly fetched a large plastic cover, all from inside the backpack she always carried with her, and covered her backpack entirely to secure its contents from getting wet. She had usually been using the cover all to save her things from rain, but now she hoped for it to work just as well with seawater, despite its worn-out condition. Once her backpack was secured, Karen took a deep breath and jumped straight inside the water, her tired limbs working in perfect coordination with her body. She was in survival mode and simply focused on reaching the yacht. After what felt like an eternity, she finally grabbed onto the hull and pushed herself toward the small stairway, which led her directly onto the deck. Huffing and panting, she climbed aboard, falling onto the wooden floors spreading beneath her. Her eyes swept over the place, and she immediately noticed how absolutely beautiful everything was. The yacht almost seemed untouched with how pristine the interior was. Karen stood up, dripping wet, while she took off her backpack and kept it on one side, beginning to explore the place. Despite its pristine condition, the unlocked doors suggested that someone had been here before. But now, it seemed empty and all hers. She breathed in deeply, fetching her knife from the pocket of her camouflage jacket as she carefully wrapped her right hand around the hilt. She still needed to explore the place as cautiously as possible, for any possible dangers that might await her inside. It would be nightfall soon, and Karen had no desire to take any risks. She opened the main door and walked inside, realizing how luxurious the interior was. The seating was plush in the moderately sized living room, with a fully stocked kitchen on one side and a small bedroom on the other. Karen walked into the kitchen, her eyes widening when she saw tins of canned food, several cartons of bottled water, and a first aid kit by the counter. Karen's heart leapt, wondering if she could survive here for some time at least. She knew it would be delusional to believe that she could make the yacht her home permanently, but she still needed to try. Running had become tiresome, and Karen needed a place to rest for a while. This yacht seemed like the perfect hiding spot, and she would need to make the most of it. Karen looked around her new shelter, finally certain that no one was inside. Now all she needed to do was secure the place against any and all intruders. The apocalypse had taught her how other humans were just as dangerous as the undead, and it would be wise if Karen protected herself against anything and everything. She spent the next few days welding the doors shut to secure the yacht, leaving only the main door for her entrance and exit. She set up traps on the windows and other gates to deter intruders, lest someone showed up, be it human, of zombie. She wasn't about to let anyone take away her sanctuary. Drawing from the survival setups she had observed throughout the apocalypse, she also rigged up a rainwater collection system, using the yacht's sail to funnel water into storage tanks for drinking and other uses. The only thing which disappointed her was a lack of weapons on board. She had discovered a flare gun in the yacht's emergency kit, along with tools, a compass, a map, and various technical gadgets she didn't fully understand. She did have her own rifle, pistol, and knife, but she needed more weapons to protect herself. Hence, she tried to craft a spear using a broomstick and almost gave up midway due to how hectic the task was. But after forcing herself, she finally managed to complete it. She was glad to see the sharpness of her spear as it glowed in the sunlight. Working diligently on the yacht helped her fill her days with routine. Before the apocalypse, it had been difficult for her to wake up for work early in the morning, despite her alarms. But now she woke up at dawn with no alarms whatsoever. She was often surprised at this change in her personality, but she knew all of it was necessary if she hoped to survive. Every single day, she had to step out on the deck to check the perimeters for any signs of movement. Gladly, there had been none since she had arrived. She had the feeling she would hear the zombies through their guttural groans if they ever came close, but she also needed to be careful about passing boats or any other humans trying to come aboard. She also dedicated time each day to maintaining her supplies, ensuring her weapons remained in top condition, and collecting rainwater whenever it rained. She still had enough food and water to last for a month or two, but she still could not stay on the yacht forever. She would have to venture out sooner or later in search of more water and food. Karen knew from experience that the zombies would come near her eventually, because they were spreading rapidly, and even if she had not seen them yet, she had heard their groans from somewhere in the distance quite often in the middle of the night. But she was not going to sit around and do nothing. She had a plan. If she could somehow venture into the mainland to scavenge supplies right now and return back alive, she would shut herself inside the yacht for months, staying safe if the zombies reached the marina, which was bound to happen any time now. The yacht had a small dinghy, which Karen could use to reach the shore, which she would hide by the docks, and then use it to bring supplies safely back to the yacht. It was all planned in her head, despite how risky it might be. She could be found by the zombies, or her safe place could be discovered by another survivor, who might try to rob her supplies. But this was the only way to ensure long-term survival for Karen, and she was not going to back down. The next morning, Karen finally found the courage for bringing her plan to action and decided to set out for her supply run. She tiptoed out onto the boat deck and safely took out the dinghy, which was tied to the side of the yacht. The dinghy was heavier than she had expected, but Karen held on, doing her best to make as little noise as possible. The zombies had an excellent sense of sound and were extremely attracted to noise. Hence, she needed to be careful. Once the dinghy was out, Karen lowered it into the water along with her modestly packed backpack, which was still mostly empty, to store the scavenged supplies. The risk of starting the engine was high, so Karen decided to oar her way to the shore instead, not wanting to invite any attention towards her from both humans and zombies. It took her much longer, and she was tired by the end of it, but she managed to reach the shore safely, no other living or dead creature in sight. She was almost certain this supply run could be a success, only if she did everything carefully. She stayed in the shadows and hidden behind buildings or pillars as she made her way back towards the city, and just on the outskirts, her gaze fell on a grocery store. The place appeared disheveled from the outside, the door hanging by the hinges and all the glass from the windows being completely broken. Despite that, Karen walked inside hopefully and noticed that the shelves were still somewhat stocked. It was enough material that she would be able to carry back with her. She quickly filled her backpack with as much food and water as she could find, and once her backpack was filled to the brim, she headed back to the dinghy. She might have been able to carry more supplies with her if she went to the city and searched for more stores to scavenge, but Karen had no desire to be greedy and lose her safety net. She needed to be extremely cautious when making these decisions. Taking a deep breath, Karen stepped out of the store and sprinted toward the shore, where her dinghy remained hidden in a small cove by the dock. She had no problem finding her dinghy, but just as she was loading it, she heard the terrifyingly familiar grunts from somewhere behind her. She turned around to find no one in sight, but the sounds were dangerously close. She was sure they might have smelled her and must have decided to follow the trail. Her heartbeat accelerated as she jumped into the dinghy, keeping her backpack inside it. Karen picked up the oar, still not ready to fire up the engine in case the zombies showed up to her quicker because of the sound. But before she had even moved an inch, several zombies began to filter on the shore, right in front of her. Karen's eyes widened as she looked at them, realizing how long it had been since she had been forced to fight them for survival. But it was not too late. She had fueled the engine beforehand, preparing for this exact moment. Karen stared at the twisted creatures before her, afraid but resilient, and fired up the engine, which came to life in one go. The undead must have realized she was running away because they quickened their pace, but Karen steered herself towards the yacht through her dinghy, leaving the zombies to scrape their claws against the sand. They couldn't swim, which was Karen's only hope. For now, she was safe. As soon as she reached the yacht, she cut off the engine and threw her backpack on board before climbing up herself. As she turned around to bring the dinghy on the deck as well, she heard footsteps behind her. Karen turned around slowly, her gaze widening when she noticed several zombies scattered onto the deck, all of them rushing towards her in one go. The undead had somehow managed to follow her and reach the yacht. How was this even possible? Karen's heart sank, but this was not the time to think. She had been careless, and now her sanctuary was compromised, which only meant that she needed to do something. And she was certainly not one to hesitate. She had fashioned 2 spears from broomsticks she'd found on the yacht. One of them was still inside, but the other one was resting on the side of the deck. Karen watched the zombies move towards her, but she threw her backpack towards them and ducked to the other side to pick the spear which was placed at one corner. Her movements were fueled by adrenaline and desperation, but this was exactly what she needed. The undead threw the bag aside and lunged towards her, their claws scraping against the deck, but Karen had been practicing with the spear for quite some time now. She moved forward fearlessly, spearing one of the zombies straight in its skull, the creature falling dead before her eyes. She continued to fight back with everything she had, forgetting all the exhaustion of her supply run as her spear went on cutting through flesh and bone. The fight was a blur of motion and adrenaline, but Karen did not once stop. She couldn't. There was only 5 of them, and 3 of them were already dead, but the remaining 2 continued to attack her, trying to find one way or the other to somehow claw her face or neck. But she was not going to let it happen. With a desperate cry, she once again tried to plunge her spear into the zombie's skull, and this time it went through, the creature falling down. Before she could turn around and attack the last one, it caught her from behind, choking her neck with extreme strength. Still having a hold of her spear, Karen took it out from the zombie's skull and turned it around to attack the zombie that was still holding her. She accidentally poked her own thigh instead, pain shooting up her leg, but she still did not stop. Taking a deep breath, she finally managed to plunge it in the zombie's thigh, and it finally let her go. Karen did not waste a single second and fetched her dagger from the pocket of her jeans and stuck it inside the zombie's head. The creature let out a final ear-piercing shriek before collapsing on the deck, twitching and then falling still. She stood at the deck, unsure of how exactly had she managed to fight and kill 5 of them all alone. It was almost an impossible fight, but she had somehow managed to prevail. It was still unbelievable. Karen staggered back, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she tried to take some hold of herself. She kept looking down at the dead zombies, her mind racing. She had managed to survive one way or the other, but she knew her sanctuary was no longer safe. She would either need to take the yacht much further away into the water or somehow fortify it to make it stronger and safer. But for now, she was at least alive. She made quick work of the bodies and threw them all in the water, watching them sink into the depths of the clear waves. She stared at the yacht around her, knowing fully well that giving this up would be a mistake, but she was already sure of what she needed to do. At first light, she would somehow manage to steer the yacht away into deeper waters, and then she would fortify it. The supplies she had scavenged and the ones she already had would last her for several months. She used them wisely, and she still had her dinghy to make supply runs on the mainland. She would need more weapons, and she would practice fighting every single day. That was the least she could do to protect herself. And Karen had no desire to die. She kept the dinghy safely away and disappeared inside the yacht, fading against the setting sun. She could not believe that the entire day gone by already. The wind around her was blowing wildly, and Karen was unsure about her future, and she knew the zombies were still out there, somewhere in the distance. But for now, she was safe, and she had a plan for tomorrow. All she needed to do was trust herself and her instincts, and she would be able to build a home for herself in the midst of these shattered remains. That was all she could hope for, because tomorrow was definitely a new day, and Karen had never been one to give up so easily.